A mother's last strength. The story of a stray cat family's rescue. She lay motionless on the roadside, her two kittens nudging her, desperate for a response. But their mother didn't move. That moment changed everything. In a world that often rushes past suffering, one young man chose to stop. And in doing so, he changed 3 lives, and perhaps his own. It was a quiet afternoon in the countryside, the kind of day that felt suspended in time. The sky was a soft, pale blue, streaked with wisps of white clouds. The sun filtered gently through the canopy of trees, casting dappled shadows on the narrow road that wound between fields of golden grass and wildflowers. The air smelled of warm earth, hay, and the faint sweetness of honeysuckle. Jake walked with an easy rhythm, his canvas bag swinging at his side. He had just left the local farmer's market, where he'd picked up fresh tomatoes, a dozen brown eggs, and a still-warm loaf of sourdough. His thoughts were on dinner, maybe a tomato and basil tart, and the quiet evening ahead. He looked forward to the solitude, the comfort of routine. But fate had other plans. As he passed a patch of overgrown grass near an old, crumbling haystack, something caught his eye. A flicker of movement, a flash of ginger fur, barely visible among the weeds. He slowed, squinting. At first, he thought it was a piece of trash, a tattered scarf or a discarded toy. But then it moved again. Jake's heart skipped. He stepped off the road, the grass brushing against his legs, and approached cautiously. There, nestled in the tall grass, was a cat, a mother. Her body was curled protectively around 2 tiny kittens. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Her fur was dull and matted, her ribs visible beneath her skin. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. The kittens were no more than a few weeks old, barely bigger than his hand. They were nudging her side, mewing softly, trying to nurse. But there was no milk, no warmth, just desperation. Jake knelt beside them, his breath catching in his throat. He reached out and gently touched the mother's side. Her fur was coarse and cold. Her heartbeat was faint, but it was there. Her ears twitched weakly at his touch. The kittens looked up at him with wide, confused eyes. Their tiny bodies trembled. Their fur was dirty, their bellies sunken. They clung to their mother, unaware that she was slipping away. Jake looked around. The road was empty. No houses nearby. No food, no shelter. Just this little family, slowly fading in the grass. He knew if he walked away, they wouldn't survive. Without a second thought, Jake stood and ran. He sprinted the rest of the way home, his groceries forgotten on the porch. He burst into the garage, grabbed an old pet carrier, and lined it with a soft towel. He filled a bottle with warm water and grabbed a blanket. When he returned, the kittens were still there, huddled beside their mother. She hadn't moved. He knelt down, his hands trembling, and gently scooped up the kittens. They mewed in protest, but didn't resist. He placed them in the carrier, then turned to the mother. She was so light, barely more than skin and bones. He lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you now." The nearest veterinary clinic was in town, nearly 10 miles away. Jake drove with one hand on the wheel, the other steadying the carrier on the passenger seat. Every bump in the road made his heart lurch. At the clinic, the receptionist took one look at the cats and called the vet immediately. They rushed the mother to the back, placing her on a cold stainless steel table. Her temperature was dangerously low. Her gums were pale. Her body showed signs of severe malnutrition and dehydration. "She's in critical condition," the vet said, "but we'll do everything we can." They inserted in 4 drip, wrapped her in warm blankets, and began administering fluids and glucose. Meanwhile, a technician examined the kittens. Their temperatures were low, but they were stable, hungry, but strong enough to survive. Jake stood nearby, watching, helpless but hopeful. 3 hours later, the mother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She tried to lift her head, then her body. She urinated on the table, her organs still struggling to function. But she was alive. The vet smiled. She's a fighter. Jake's guest room had never seen much use. It was a quiet, sunlit space with pale blue walls, a small bookshelf, and a window that overlooked the garden. Until now, it had been a place for storage and the occasional overnight guest. But that evening, it became a sanctuary. He laid out soft fleece blankets in a corner, layering them over a thick rug to create a warm nest. He placed a heating pad beneath one side, careful to leave room for the cats to move away if they got too warm. A shallow cardboard box became a makeshift den, lined with towels and a small stuffed animal for comfort. He dimmed the lights and set a bowl of fresh water nearby, along with a dish of soft, high-calorie food. Maggie was placed gently in the center of it all. Her body still limp, but her eyes open now, watchful, wary. Scout and Luna were nestled beside her, their tiny bodies curling instinctively into her warmth. Though she didn't move much, her gaze followed Jake as he moved around the room, as if trying to understand who he was and why he was helping. Jake sat on the floor for a long time that night, just watching them. The room was quiet except for the occasional rustle of blankets or the soft mew of a kitten. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and the stars blinked into view. Inside, something fragile and beautiful was beginning to take root. The days that followed were a blur of care, patience, and small victories. Maggie remained weak, but she began to eat, just a few bites at first, then more. Jake offered her food by hand, speaking softly, encouraging her with every nibble. Her eyes, once dull and sunken, began to regain their light. Her fur, though still patchy, started to show signs of softness. She began to stretch, to shift positions, to lift her head when Jake entered the room. The kittens, meanwhile, were growing stronger by the day. Jake fed them every few hours, warming their formula to just the right temperature, holding them gently in his hands as they suckled from the syringe. He learned to recognize their personalities: Scout, bold and curious, always the first to explore; Luna, gentle and observant, often content to curl up and watch. One morning, Jake walked in to find Maggie grooming Luna. It was the first time she had shown maternal behavior since the rescue. Her tongue moved slowly, deliberately, as if she were remembering what it meant to be a mother. Luna purred softly, pressing into her mother's side. Jake felt a lump rise in his throat. It was such a simple act, but it meant everything. As the weeks passed, Maggie began to walk again. Her steps were shaky at first, but she grew stronger. She started to follow Jake around the room, rubbing against his legs, watching him with calm, intelligent eyes. She began to purr when he pet her, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the room with warmth. The kittens became little whirlwinds of energy. They chased each other across the floor, pounced on toys, and climbed the furniture with reckless enthusiasm. Their fur grew thick and glossy, their eyes bright and full of life. The guest room, once quiet and still, now echoed with the sounds of play, of purring, of life. Jake had always lived a quiet life. He worked remotely as a freelance graphic designer, spent his weekends tending to his garden, and enjoyed the solitude of the countryside. He liked the predictability of his days, the calm of his routines. But Maggie, Scout, and Luna changed everything. His mornings now began with soft meows and tiny paws tapping at his bedroom door. His afternoons were punctuated by playtime, by the sound of kittens tumbling through the hallway, by Maggie curling up beside him as he worked. His evenings were filled with the comforting rhythm of feeding, grooming, and cuddling. He found himself smiling more, laughing at Scout's clumsy leaps, at Luna's dramatic flops onto his lap. He talked to them constantly, narrating his day, reading aloud, singing softly as he cooked. The house, once so quiet, now felt alive. Jake also began to change in ways he hadn't expected. He became more patient, more present. He started journaling again, documenting their progress, their milestones, their quirks. He took hundreds of photos: Maggie sunbathing on the windowsill, Scout mid-pounce, Luna curled up in a teacup. Neighbors began to notice. Friends who hadn't heard from him in months reached out after seeing his posts online. Some dropped by with toys and treats. Others simply wanted to meet the little family that had captured so many hearts. Jake realized that in saving them, he had opened a door in himself he hadn't even known was closed. A door to connection, to vulnerability, to love. In a world that often rushes past suffering, Jake chose to stop. He didn't have a plan. He didn't know what to do. But he saw pain.
And he chose compassion.
He saw a mother who had given everything for her children, and he gave her the one thing she needed most, a chance. Maggie had nothing left. Her body was broken, her spirit fading, but she had held on for them. And when she couldn't hold on any longer, someone else did. That's what love is. Not always loud or grand. Sometimes it's quiet. It's a warm blanket on a cold night. A hand reaching out in the dark. A voice saying, "You're safe now." Jake's act of kindness didn't just save 3 lives. It transformed them. It gave Maggie the chance to be a mother again. It gave Scout and Luna the chance to grow, to play, to live. And it gave Jake something he hadn't even known he was missing, a sense of purpose, of connection, of joy. We often underestimate the power of small actions. A moment of attention, a decision to care. But those moments ripple outward. They change the course of lives. So if you ever see suffering, don't look away. Don't tell yourself it's not your problem, because sometimes you are the only one who can make a difference. And sometimes the ones we rescue end up rescuing us. They remind us of who we are, of who we can be, of the quiet strength that lives in all of us. Maggie's last strength was love. Jake's first strength was compassion. Together, they created something beautiful. And every time Jake sees them curled up together in the sunlight, Maggie's tail wrapped around her kittens, all 3 of them purring in harmony, he remembers that moment on the roadside. The stillness, the desperation, and the choice that changed everything. Because love, even in its smallest form,
Can echo for a lifetime.